Alex Eala rejected a billion-dollar offer, and the internet lost its mind. The whole WTA went quiet. Brands went into emergency meetings. Fans in the Philippines couldn't believe what they were reading. But here's what nobody told you. Behind every viral headline, behind every fake number and fabricated quote, there is a real story. A story about a 20-year-old girl from Quezon City who had every reason to chase the money and chose something else entirely. This is not just where you think you've already heard. This is the story they don't want you to understand. Stay until the end, because the truth about Alex Eala and Nike is more powerful than any billion-dollar contract could ever be.
To understand why the internet exploded the way it did, you have to go back to the beginning. Not 2025, not 2024. You have to go back to a little girl in Quezon City who picked up a tennis racket at 4 years old because her grandfather handed it to her and believed in something he couldn't fully explain yet. Alexandra Maniego Eala was born on May 23, 2005, into a family of overachievers. Her mother, Riza Maniego Eala, was not just a former national swimmer who won bronze at the 1985 SEA Games. She was also the chief financial officer of Globe Telecom, one of the Philippines' most powerful telecommunications companies. Her father, Mike Eala, was a businessman. Her uncle, Noli Eala, was a former Philippines Sports Commission chairperson and commissioner of the Philippine Basketball Association. Her brother played tennis for Penn State. Excellence wasn't a goal in this family. It was the baseline. And yet, Alex Eala was never handed anything on court. At 8 years old, she became a Globe Telecom ambassador, not because of her ranking, she barely had one, but because even then, people who watched her play saw something that the numbers couldn't capture: a presence, a clarity, a refusal to panic when things got hard. By the time she was 14, she had left home entirely, moving to the Rafa Nadal Academy in Manacor, Spain, one of the most demanding tennis institutions on earth. She lived away from her family, away from the only culture and language she had ever known, grinding out sessions under the Spanish sun with players from across the world, none of whom knew or cared who she was. She graduated from that academy in 2023, emerging not just as a better tennis player, but as a different kind of human being, someone who had tested her own limits and come out the other side. The results followed: junior Grand Slam titles, ITF circuit victories, a slow, grinding climb up the WTA rankings. In 2019, a brand that has never been shy about picking winners looked at this teenager from Manila and made a decision. Nike signed her. That partnership was not a coincidence, and it was not charity. Nike, the most powerful sports brand on the planet, does not give deals to teenage players out of sentiment. They sign people they believe will become icons. They signed LeBron, they signed Serena, they signed Rafael Nadal, and then, in 2019, they signed a 14-year-old Filipina girl who hadn't won anything yet at the professional level because they could see what was coming. That is the foundation you need to understand before a single dollar figure enters this conversation. Because when the internet started screaming about billion-dollar rejections and shocking contract decisions, they were screaming about a girl who had spent over a decade building something so authentic, so carefully, so stubbornly, that no amount of money was ever going to make her compromise it. But here's where it gets interesting, because the world didn't believe that story was dramatic enough. Keep watching, because what happened next on social media is something no one in the WTA was prepared for. There is a specific kind of content that thrives in the Philippine social media landscape, and once you understand it, you will understand exactly why Alex Eala became the most fabricated athlete name on the internet in 2025 and 2026. The formula is simple. Take a real athlete who is genuinely rising, take a global brand that carries enormous prestige, invent a number so large it makes people stop scrolling, then add a quote, something humble, something Filipino, something that makes you feel proud to be from where she's from. Watch it spread. By September 2025, a Facebook post had gone viral claiming that sports brand Wilson had offered Alex Eala a $45 million endorsement deal and that she had accepted it. The quote attributed to her in the post read, "Thank you for trusting me, but I will take that money and use it to do something that truly helps others, because there are many people who need it more than I do, and I want the Philippines to continue growing stronger." That single post collected over 103,000 likes, 6,700 comments, and 3,100 shares before fact-checkers could even get to it. Rappler and Verifiles investigated and confirmed what many suspected. It was completely fabricated. Wilson never made the offer. Eala never said those words. The deal never existed. But by then, the emotional damage, or rather the emotional impact, had already rippled across the internet in ways that were almost impossible to reverse. Because here's the thing about a lie that feels good. People want it to be true. And when the fact check came out, some people were angry at the fact checkers, not the fabricators. That was just the beginning. By February 2026, as Alex Eala was competing in the UAE at the WTA 500 Mubadala Abu Dhabi Open, another story exploded across Facebook. This time, the number wasn't 45 million, it was $1.6 billion, allegedly offered by Abu Dhabi billionaire Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan. The claim described a 10-year contract worth $1 billion as a down payment and $600 million per year for Eala to become the queen of a new Abu Dhabi Diamond Tennis Championship. The Post called it the biggest contract in sports history. Verifiles investigated again. The photos in the Post were composites, edited together. There was no record of any meeting between Eala and Sheikh Mansour. There was no new tournament. The entire thing was fiction dressed in the language of Filipino pride. And yet, the comment sections on those posts were filled with people writing, "Congratulations, Alex, proud Pinoy, and you deserve it, anak." People were celebrating a contract that never happened for a player who had never agreed to anything. The misinformation wasn't just spreading, it was becoming part of how people understood and loved her. Think about what that does to a person. Think about what it does to a 20-year-old athlete who is already carrying the weight of an entire nation's hopes on her shoulders, who is already dealing with the pressure of every match, every ranking point, every press conference, to also exist as a canvas onto which millions of strangers project whatever story makes them feel the most pride. The real story was always more extraordinary than the fake ones, but nobody was paying attention to the real story until Nike made sure they had to. You won't believe what Nike did next and why it changed everything for Alex Eala's legacy. While the internet was busy fabricating billion-dollar rejection stories and multi-million-dollar Wilson deals, the real relationship between Alex Eala and Nike was quietly becoming one of the most meaningful athlete brand stories in the history of women's tennis. Let's go back to what actually happened. Nike had signed Eala in 2019, when she was just 14 years old and still years away from her professional breakthrough. That original deal carried her through the Rafa Nadal Academy years, through her junior Grand Slam victories, through the early grinding ITF seasons where she was winning titles in Chiang Mai and Roehampton and Yekla, while the wider tennis world barely noticed. Nike was there through all of it, not with $1 billion, with something more valuable: belief. Then came 2025, the Miami Open wildcard run that changed everything. The moment the world stopped and paid attention, a wildcard, ranked number 140, walked into Miami and beat Jelena Ostapenko, then Madison Keys, then Iga Swiatek, becoming the first wildcard in history to defeat 3 major champions in straight sets at a single WTA event. She lost to Jessica Pegula in the semifinals, but by that point, the number she wore on her shirt and the swoosh on her apparel had been seen by millions of people around the world who had never heard of Alexandra Eala before that week. On March 31st, 2025, she entered the WTA's top 100 for the first time, the first Filipino ever to do it in a ranking history that stretches back to 1975. And Nike renewed. Reports indicate the renewed partnership is valued at approximately $75 million, a figure that, while nowhere near the fabricated billions that circulated on social media, represents one of the most significant endorsement commitments ever made to a Filipino athlete. But what Nike did beyond the contract number is what makes the story truly remarkable. At Wimbledon 2025, before Eala played in what would become her debut at the All England Club, Nike presented her with a custom hair tie. It wasn't a standard Nike product. It was a piece shaped in the form of the Sampaguita blossom, the national flower of the Philippines. The gift arrived in a box carrying a handwritten message in Filipino. Kung may tinanim, may aanihin. If you plant, you will harvest. That is not a brand transaction. That is a brand saying, we know who you are, and we are not just sponsoring a tennis player, we are honoring a culture. Then, in February 2026, just days before this story was told, Alex Eala visited the Nike World Headquarters near Beaverton, Oregon. She walked through the legendary Ambassador Tunnel, the corridor where portraits of the greatest Nike athletes in history hang. LeBron, Serena, Ronaldo, and now, alongside them, a portrait of a 20-year-old girl from Quezon City, standing with a peace sign and a smile, beneath words that read, "History in full bloom." History in full bloom. 3 words. Not $1 billion, not a record-breaking contract, just the acknowledgement that what is growing here is something that cannot be bought and something that cannot be faked. Jessica Pegula, one of the top 5 players on the WTA tour, was asked about Eala during the Dubai tournament. She said, "Alex is amazing. The way she's been able to pack stadiums and the way her country supports her is something special. She handles it so maturely, with such grace." Coco Gauff, who defeated Eala in the quarterfinals at Dubai, took a moment after the match to thank Eala publicly for bringing a new demographic to the sport. Not for her ranking, not for her titles, for what she represents to people who had never had a reason to care about tennis before she appeared. That is the real story of what Alex Eala and Nike built together. It is not a story of rejection, it is a story of alignment, of a young woman and a brand that both understood from the very beginning that the real value was never in the number. But here's the part that will genuinely surprise you, because the fake stories weren't just annoying, they were revealing something much deeper about what Alex Eala means to the Philippines. There is a question that never gets asked in the middle of all the viral posts and fabricated contracts and celebration emojis in the comment sections. The question is this: what does it actually feel like to be Alex Eala? Not the version of her that the internet invented, not the one who rejects billion-dollar deals with tearful quotes about helping the poor. The real one. The 20-year-old who wakes up every morning and has to be a professional athlete while also being a symbol, a hope, a projection screen for an entire archipelago of people who need her to represent something bigger than a tennis match. By February 2026, Eala had climbed to world number 31, the highest ranking any Filipino has ever achieved in WTA history. She had become the first Filipino to break into the top 50, the first to defeat multiple top 5 players at tour level, the first to reach a WTA 1000 event semifinal. Every first she achieves carries not just personal significance, but national weight. Every time she steps on a court, she is not just playing for herself, she is playing for every Filipino kid who has ever been told that the world's biggest stages weren't built for people who look like her. In an interview after the Dubai run, Eala reflected on what the past year had meant. She said, "Especially this past year, 2026, has brought me a lot of love and attention from the fans. It comes with its set of struggles and set of sacrifices, but I think in the end I need to remind myself this is what I've been working my whole life for. How many people would love to be in my position? I make it a point every day to really give my all and be grateful for what I have." That is not the language of someone overwhelmed by fake billion-dollar contract stories. That is the language of someone who has chosen, consciously and deliberately, to stay grounded in the reality of what she has actually earned, and to let that be enough. But the fake stories reveal something painful that Eala herself can never fully say out loud. They reveal the gap between what the Philippines needs her to be and what any human being can actually carry. When people invented a $45 million Wilson deal and filled the comment section with congratulations, they weren't being malicious. They were expressing a hunger, a desperate, beautiful, heartbreaking hunger for their athlete to be recognized in ways that match the size of their love for her. The misinformation flourishes, as media observers have noted, because of the prestige of global brands, the allure of exaggerated figures, and the pride Filipinos feel in seeing one of their own linked to international recognition. In a fast-moving social media environment, unverified claims spread faster than real confirmation, and the silence around actual contract details leaves room for stories to fill the vacuum. And here is the tragedy in that. Alex Eala's real story, her actual journey from Quezon City to the Nike Ambassador Tunnel in Oregon, is already extraordinary enough to make an entire nation cry with pride. She doesn't need the fake billions. She doesn't need the invented rejections. She needs the truth to be told loudly enough that it drowns out the noise. Because what she has actually done, what she has actually built, is something the internet's fiction writers could never have imagined, no matter how large their numbers got. What happened next at Indian Wells is the moment everyone is now waiting for, and it will either confirm everything or rewrite the whole story. Here is what you need to understand about Alex Eala and the concept of loyalty, because it is the hidden thread running through every chapter of her story that nobody has connected yet. At 8 years old, she signed with Globe Telecom. She still represents Globe Telecom today. At the start of her junior career, she signed with Babolat for her rackets. She still plays with a Babolat Pure Aero in 2026. In 2019, she signed with Nike. In 2026, after becoming the highest-ranked Filipino in WTA history, Nike renewed with her, and she walked through their Oregon headquarters with a peace sign, standing beneath her own portrait in the same tunnel that holds the legends of the sport. In July 2025, she was introduced as a brand ambassador for Locally Juice. Not a global megacorporation, a Filipino juice company, the kind of brand that says, "I remember where I came from," louder than any press release could. In a world where athletes regularly chase the biggest check available, where switching brands is a business strategy and loyalty is considered naive, Alex Eala has quietly built a roster of partners that reads like a portrait of her actual life. A Filipino telecom company, a French tennis brand, an American sportswear giant, a Filipino bank, a Filipino juice company, each one chosen not for maximum financial exposure, but for alignment with her values, her roots, and the story she is choosing to tell about herself. The fake billion-dollar stories all follow the same pattern. A foreign entity of enormous power and wealth comes to Eala with a number that should be impossible to refuse, and she refuses it with a beautiful quote about helping the Philippines. The narrative always positions the money as the test and her rejection of it as the proof of her character. But real loyalty doesn't work that way. Real loyalty is not a dramatic rejection of fortune. It is a quiet, consistent choice made over years to keep showing up for the people and institutions that showed up for you first. Globe Telecom showed up when she was 8. Babolat showed up when she was a junior. Nike showed up when she was 14 and unproven. And all of these relationships are still standing today, not because she rejected billion-dollar alternatives, but because she never stopped honoring the commitment she made at the beginning. That is a more powerful story than any fabricated rejection could ever be. And it is completely verifiably true. As she arrived in the United States in late February 2026, preparing for Indian Wells and then Miami, the tournament where 12 months earlier she had announced herself to the world, the question hanging over everything was not about contracts, it was about continuity. Could she sustain this? Could she keep climbing? Could she become, as the Nike portrait suggested, not just a player who made history, but a player who kept making it? The ranking said world number 31. The Nike Ambassador Tunnel said history in full bloom. And the girl from Quezon City standing in Oregon with a peace sign and a smile seemed to say, "I'm just getting started." One more thing before we get to the final reflection, and this is the part that will make you think differently about every viral story you see from now on. Alex Eala didn't reject $1 billion. She did something harder. She stayed true to every relationship that mattered, stayed grounded in every value she was raised with, and let her tennis do the talking, while the internet invented stories around her that could never quite match the real one. The fake contracts will keep going viral, the fabricated quotes will keep circulating, but none of them will ever be as powerful as the image of a 20-year-old from Quezon City standing in the Nike Ambassador Tunnel, her portrait alongside the legends, the word history above her head, a peace sign in her hand, and 16 years of sacrifice behind her smile. That is the real story of Alex Eala and Nike. That is what the WTA didn't see coming. That is what left everyone speechless. If this story moved you, if you believe in athletes who build something real instead of chasing something fake, smash that subscribe button right now. We cover the stories behind the stories in women's tennis, the drama, the truth, and everything in between. Hit the bell so you never miss what's coming next, because with Alex Eala, the best chapters haven't been written yet.